Parents, picture this. Your teenager is home on a Saturday afternoon. The house is quiet. Their phone is in another room, and there's literally nothing scheduled for the rest of the day. No notifications buzzing, endless feed to scroll through. And for many parents that I work with, that image triggers instant worry. Well, what if they get bored? Well, what if boredom leads them straight back to pornography or gaming? But here's what I want you to hear today. That exact moment of boredom, that uncomfortable silence, that actually might be one of the most powerful protective gifts that you can give to your teen in their battle against pornography addiction and compulsive tech use. Hello, parents, and welcome back to the Parent Guide podcast. I'm Matt Bulkley, a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist. It's been helping families navigate pornography addiction, screen overuse, and the emotional challenges that come with raising teens in a hyper-stimulated world. And this entire episode today is built around a recent article that I wrote that I titled Reclaiming Boredom: How Embracing Silence Strengthens Teens Against Porn and Tech Addiction, and includes the newest recent research from the last 2 years in this particular area. And I know that that sounds a little bit contradictory because we have often labeled boredom to be the big enemy in this. But we live in a world now that treats boredom like a problem to be solved instantly with another notification or another video, another dopamine hit. But the science is actually clear on this, that boredom in and of itself is not the enemy. It's actually a vital brain function, in a way, a built-in reset button for the developing teenage prefrontal cortex of the brain. And when we eliminate it completely, unintentionally make our teens more vulnerable to the very addictions that we're trying to prevent. So in this episode, we are going to explore this idea and this concept and its application. And I hope at the end that you will understand exactly why the teenage brain craves constant stimulation, what the latest studies reveal about boredom as a direct pathway to problematic pornography use. And I'm going to detail 2 real-life, of course, anonymized case scenarios from my therapy practice, talk about the long-term emotional and neurological benefits of reclaiming those quiet moments, and 5 practical step-by-step strategies for parents that you can begin implementing this very week, with tips for overcoming the resistance that you'll probably almost certainly encounter from your teen. But if your teen seems incapable of sitting still without a screen, if unstructured time automatically leads to pornography, or if you're just simply exhausted from trying to keep them entertained all the time, then this episode is especially for you. There's real hope here, and it starts with something as simple as, and I know it sounds crazy, but allowing a little boredom back into their lives. So let's get into this. Parents often say to me, well, Matt, my teen literally cannot handle being bored for even 5 minutes without grabbing their phone or immediately seeking out a screen. And they feel like it's a personal failure that their child is, or that their child is lazy or entitled. But let me reassure you that that is not actually the case. So it's not laziness. And is it true that some parents might enable this? Well, yeah. But what this actually is neuroscience in action. The teenage brain still under major construction, and particularly the prefrontal cortex, that critical region right behind your forehead, responsible for impulse control, decision making, future planning, emotional regulation, self-awareness. We know that it is one of the last areas to fully mature, and what the research shows, it doesn't finishing develop until the mid and sometimes even late 20s is what research suggesting. Now, layer on top of that the constant digital stimulation that our teens face, endless notifications, TikTok videos that change every 8 seconds, YouTube autoplay, the Instagram Reels, chat streaks, and of course, instant access to explicit pornography. And each of these delivers rapid, intense bursts of dopamine, which as you know, is the brain's primary feel-good neurotransmitter. And over time, the brain adapts to these high-speed reward environments, and it starts to expect constant novelty and high stimulation. And when that stimulation disappears, even for just a few minutes, The teen experiences discomfort, restlessness, even mild distress. And the silence feels almost intolerable in some cases. And this is where pornography becomes such a dangerous escape. Pornography delivers an extremely potent dopamine spike, far more intense than most real-life rewards. And with today's internet, well, it's available 24/7, total privacy. And boredom often becomes the trigger that pushes a teen toward that quick fix. So let's look at what the newest research actually says. 2026, just over this last year, a replication study specifically examined problematic pornography consumption as an existential escape. The researchers found that when teens and adults experienced a sense of meaninglessness, something often signaled first by boredom, strongly predicts higher levels of problematic porn use. The pathway is clear. Boredom leads to emotional avoidance. Boredom leads to emotional avoidance, which leads to using porn, not primarily for sexual gratification, but as a way to escape uncomfortable feelings or an empty sense of time. In complementing that, a 2025 systematic review on trait boredom and problematic technology use, which included online pornography, analyzed multiple studies and found consistent, strong positive links. Adolescents who score higher on measures of boredom proneness are significantly more likely to turn to digital media and porn during any unstructured or idle time instead of engaging in offline activities or creative pursuits or actual face-to-face, real-to-life social connection. We also have longitudinal data from the COVID pandemic years that showed boredom avoidance was one of the top reported motivations for increased pornography consumption among teens. So when school was remote, when routines disappeared and free time expanded, many teens filled that void with screens and pornography because they had never learned to tolerate the discomfort of boredom. So in simple terms, just put very straightforward, boredom is the brain's way of signaling that it needs a break to reset. And without that reset, the prefrontal cortex stays in a chronically overstimulated state and impulse control weakens. Tolerance for discomfort drops and the door to compulsive behaviors, including pornography addiction, swings wide open. So parents, I want to be very clear here. This is not about blaming screens or technology or shaming teens. It's really about understanding the science here, understanding the neurobiology so we can compassionately intervene and disrupt this process and this addiction. So constant digital stimulation doesn't just make boredom feel bad. It actively rewires emotional coping patterns in ways that can last for years if we don't disrupt it, if we don't intervene. And then that's part of why early intervention in teen years is so important. So think of the dopamine cycle like this. A teen gets a quick hit from a notification or from a porn clip, and the brain releases dopamine and they feel a brief surge of excitement or relief. But then comes the crash, that subtle drop in mood or motivation. And the natural response at that point is then to seek the next hit to feel normal again. And that compounded over weeks and months and sometimes years, pattern begins to train the brain to fear any moment of stillness. And the research shows that this trait, boredom, often acts as a mediator of sorts between underlying vulnerabilities such as anxiety or low mood issues, depression, or even just normal teen stress and dysfunctional digital behaviors. So, in other words, bored or emotionally unsettled teens don't just happen to use porn. They use it strategically as a form of emotional avoidance. It numbs the discomfort temporarily. It temporarily numbs the discomfort, but it prevents them from developing healthier ways to process feelings. So in other words, their emotional development stagnates. They remain stuck. Their capacity for healthy, developmentally appropriate emotional regulation stagnates at the developmental level where the addictive process began. Just give you an example. This is why we see maybe a 20-year-old whose capacity for emotional coping actually looks more like a 12-year-old, which is the age where that addictive process started. So their bodies are getting older, but their emotional capacity is stagnated at the age when they develop the addiction. Well, let me bring this to life with two And again, anonymized cases from my therapy practice. Case one, Ethan, age 16. Ethan started to come to outpatient therapy after his parents had discovered extensive pornography use that had been escalating for well over a year. And I mean, Ethan he was an athlete and a good student, but weekends and evenings had become just a blur of scrolling that almost always ended up in pornography. Start with social media and ended up in that endless scroll, and then down the rabbit holes to porn. And when I asked him to describe what was happening in those moments, he said, "Well, when I'm bored, my brain just screams for something exciting. It's like the quiet makes me feel empty, and porn fills it immediately." And his parents noticed that he was withdrawing from family time, sleeping poorly, and struggling to focus in school. So we mapped out how unstructured time had become a trigger for him. So as part of the treatment plan, and over the space of number of months, we introduced kind of short, structured periods of quiet time. We started with just like 10 minutes of sitting without technology or devices between dinner and bedtime. And of course, paired it with outdoor walks and journaling and some of the other structured activities that are part of the Breaking Free workbook. He was using the Recovery Toolbox for Teens together with his parents. And of course, Ethan was resistant at first, but within about 6 to 8 weeks, he reported that the urges started to feel less automatic, and his capacity to demonstrate some willpower and some sense of self-discipline and self-control started to return. And his ability to tolerate downtime actually started to improve a lot. His sleep patterns started to normalize, and he even started initiating conversations with his parents again that had all but stopped. And that boredom that once drove him to pornography became something that he could sit with. And the thing is that small shift created really big momentum over time that aided him in his recovery. Now, case two, let me introduce you to Andrew, 15-year-old. He was using pornography primarily at night or sometimes after school or following conflict issues with his parents. He basically described it as, well, it's just numbing out when he felt anxious or bored, describing it something like, well, it's like my mind won't shut up, so I just escape into the screen. And the temporary relief was always followed by waves of guilt and shame afterwards, which then fueled more avoidance the next day. And when his parents found out, they were heartbroken and confused. And they had tried some things. They tried restricting devices, taking away technology, but it only seemed to make things worse. So in his therapy, we focused on helping him to identify and observe his emotions in quiet moments rather than just simply and almost mindlessly escaping them. So we started with some pretty simple, like 2-minute guided breathing exercises and going phone free after dinner, similar to what we did in the first case I described. And his mom began modeling the same practice. And over time, Andrew developed the capacity to name what he was feeling: anxiety, loneliness, restlessness, without immediately seeking that escape and reaching for pornography. So in other words, we started developing what I like to refer to as his emotional expression muscle, something that really had been severely underdeveloped for him, and which is often the case for so many of the adolescent males that I work with. And with that, his porn use decreased significantly. His anxiety levels became more manageable, and he reported feeling more like himself, more so than he had in the last few years. And parents, these aren't rare stories. I can tell you that in so many of the cases where we get serious about intervention, that these are the things that can happen. And they illustrate how digital overload creates that perfect storm, which is a weakened prefrontal cortex function, reduced emotional tolerance, and then pornography stepping in as the easiest available coping tool. But the good news, and parents, I cannot emphasize this enough, the teen brain remains highly plastic during the teenage years. And that, again, this is why early intervention is so important. When we intentionally reintroduce space for silence, looking at these periods of boredom is actually a positive and a good thing as an intervention, then the resilience can return. Well, so let's talk about what actually happens when teens learn to embrace boredom instead of fearing it or avoiding it. Well, the benefits are profound and far-reaching. First, the prefrontal cortex, gets the rest that it desperately needs. It strengthens neural pathways for that all important impulse control and decision making. And teens become better at pausing, just that little pause that's needed before acting on an urge. When they face that battle, do I do it or do I don't? Do I click or do I don't? Do I go down this link or do I don't? And whether that urge is to open a porn site or to snap at a sibling, because it comes over into emotional control too. And then second, they develop genuine self-awareness. And it's in those quiet moments, thoughts and feelings rise to the surface. And instead of escaping them, teens learn to observe and identify them. This builds emotional intelligence, empathy, and patience, the qualities that will actually serve them in the real world, in real relationships, and not just the online ones. And so this is back to what I was referring to when I mentioned beginning to exercise the emotional expression muscles, which are so often underdeveloped in adolescent males. Third, the creativity and problem solving capacities begin to flourish again because the brain in a resting state is remarkably good at making new connections. And so many of my clients report with being able to embrace boredom and starting to redevelop those emotional expression skills that they experience an improvement in sudden insights, better ideas for school projects, a lifting of the brain fog, and renewed interest in hobbies that they had previously abandoned. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, at least for this episode today, this podcast episode is that automatic pull toward compulsive behaviors weakens, that impulse control. It weakens, like the brakes for impulse control start to work again when they hit the brake. So when pornography is no longer the default escape from discomfort, the addiction cycle begins to lose its fuel. Urges become less frequent and less intense. And long term, these teens enter adulthood with a stronger internal compass, better able to handle stress and disappointment and the inevitable unstructured time that life brings, particularly as they move into young adulthood. And they have a greater potential to form deeper connections with you as parents and with family and friends because they're not constantly distracted, and they develop a healthier relationship with technology to manage it instead of being controlled by it. Well, so parents often ask, well, Matt, this sounds great in theory, but how do I actually do this without my teen fighting me every step of the way? Well, let me give you 5 practical research supported steps that I use in the clinic. We use it in Star Guides and that I often refer to parents to use as well. So, and let me walk you through these, not just tell you what to do, but why it works, how to introduce it, how to handle common pushback. So number 1 is going to be this: is you have to create tech-free zones and times. So, and maybe if you haven't done anything to this effect, start with just pretty low stakes boundaries. Simply no devices, no technology at the dinner table or in bedrooms after 9:00 p.m. Explain it as we are giving our brains a chance to recharge rather than punishment. And the why is because removing cues reduces the automatic dopamine seeking. And obviously expect complaints when you first implement this during the first few weeks. That's normal, but stay consistent and compassionate. And many families tell me that after about 2 weeks, maybe a little longer, that they start to see a reduction in the relapses and the seeking out pornography, and expand this into maybe tech-free weekends, dopamine detox weeks, tech-free vacations. And, obviously in our Star Guides program, we unplug teens for 4 straight months to disrupt the addiction and to create a complete dopamine reset. So number 2, encourage outdoor time and time in nature. So even things as simple as 20 or 30 minutes of just phone-free walking, maybe through the neighborhood or a park or hiking or biking. This helps to reset the nervous system and naturally begins to lower dopamine craving. And time outside, sunlight and the breeze in nature provides gentle stimulation without overload. Invite your teen to join you at first. Don't force conversation, just simply embrace the sensory experience of fresh air and movement, and that helps the brain to tolerate quiet. And of course, this is what our Star Guides program does all day long, every day. Number 3, model comfort with boredom yourself. And this is probably the most powerful one. Parents, put your own phone away visibly during family time. And when your teen asks, well, what you're doing, say something like, well, I'm just thinking and letting my mind wander. It actually feels good after a while. And teens, as I'm sure you know, teens learn more from what we do than what we say. So make a commitment. Do not allow your own tech use to interfere with your interactions with your teen, and model the behavior yourself. Don't just preach. Number 4, introduce simple mindfulness or breathing practices. And just, you can start tiny here, literally just 2-minute exercises. Use one of these free apps that you can download, or just guide them yourself. Like, let's notice 5 things that you can see, 4 that you can touch. And this directly strengthens the prefrontal cortex and teaches the skill of observation instead of escape. And number 5, support creative unstructured activities. So keep supplies in the house for things like drawing, art, journaling, music, building projects. Just keep them on hand, keep them available. And along with that, they'll resist the urge to have to schedule every minute for your teen. Some parents, they feel the need to entertain their children, and unfortunately, this hypervigilant parenting style can often inadvertently actually make them more vulnerable to addiction and keep that emotional development stagnated, because the teen has not had to develop the ability to just be, and they've become conditioned to expect to be entertained by their parent all the time. So this unstructured time is where original thinking is often born. And so try to link it to their interests so that it feels like freedom, not homework. And parents, as you implement these ideas, watch for gradual changes. It's not going to happen overnight, but give it a month, or give it 2 months. Be consistent and watch for some of the signs of improved focus, more patience, spontaneous conversations. Hopefully they're reporting fewer urges and relapses, that they're experiencing better sleep, and just a noticeable drop in their compulsive screen time. Well, parents, before we wrap up, let me just quickly address 2 questions that I hear a lot. So one of which is, well, what if my teen has severe addiction already? Well, the steps above still help, but they will work best alongside structured support, which leads me to our resources. Won't forcing boredom make things worse? Well, no, we're not forcing it. We're creating space. Compassion and consistency are key. And parents, remember, you are doing a difficult but all important work. A mind at ease with silence is a mind that is free. By helping your teen to reclaim boredom, you're giving them a lifelong gift to be resilient. So just start with just one small change this week. So for structured evidence-based support, I always recommend the Recovery Toolbox for Teens. You can get it in the bookstore at the website, therapyassociates.net. It's the blue version. And this includes the Breaking Free workbook, the parent guide, the 101 tips for quitting porn. And it can be used by you as a parent in the home as a parent-led intervention, or you can use it paired with outpatient treatment with a clinician of your choosing wherever you're at. And it is the curriculum that we use here at Therapy Associates in St. George, Utah, in our outpatient clinic, and also in our Star Guides Wilderness Therapy program. And in more serious situations where there's sexual acting out or trauma or high-risk behaviors, suicidality, self-harm, or when you feel like you've lost any influence in your teen's life, then Star Guides Wilderness Therapy, our wilderness program, offers intensive wilderness-based stabilization, emotional regulation, digital detox, and family rebuilding. And it is the ultimate intervention to disrupt the addiction. I've seen it happen hundreds of times. Creates a powerful reset and allows you to begin the recovery process together with your teen. And you can learn more about Star Guides, the website, starguides.net. Parents, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I know how valuable your time is, and I hope that you have found this to be helpful in supporting you in the recovery journey. Remember to subscribe for weekly guidance, research tips, and support along the way. I'm Bulkley, showing up with love, patience, and courage. Remember, you're not alone, and I will see you in the next episode.